Applause. Harry dropped his gaze to his treacle tart, his insides burning. Again. What he would give to fight Malfoy one-on-one. So what did Professor Slughorn want? Hermione asked. To know what really happened at the Ministry, said Harry. Him and everyone else here, sniffed Hermione. People were interrogating us about it on the train, weren't they, Ron? Yes, said Ron. All wanting to know if you really are the chosen one. There has been much talk on that very subject even amongst the ghosts, interrupted nearly headless Nick, inclining his barely connected head toward Harry so that it wobbled dangerously on its ruff. I am considered something of a Potter authority. It is widely known that we are friendly. I have assured the spirit community that I will not pester you for information. However, Harry Potter knows that he can confide in me with complete confidence, I told them. I would rather die than betray his trust. That's not saying much, seeing as you're already dead, Ron observed. Once again, you show all the sensitivity of a blunt axe, said nearly headless Nick in affronted tones, and he rose into the air and glided back toward the far end of the Gryffindor table just as Dumbledore got to his feet at the staff table. The talk and laughter echoing around the hall died away almost instantly. The very best of evenings to you, he said, smiling broadly, his arms opened wide as though to embrace the whole room. What happened to his hand? Gasped Hermione. She was not the only one who had noticed. Dumbledore's right hand was as blackened and dead-looking as it had been on the night he had come to fetch Harry from the Dursleys. Whispers it the room, Dumbledore, interpreting them correctly, merely smiled and shook his purple and gold sleeve over his injury. Nothing to worry about, he said airily. Now, to our new students. Welcome, to our old students, welcome back. Another year full of magical education awaits you. His hand was like that when I saw him over the summer, Harry whispered to Hermione. I thought he'd have cured it by now, though, or Madame Pomfrey would have done. It looks as if it's died, said Hermione, with a nauseated expression. But there are some injuries you can't cure, old curses, and there are poisons without antidotes. And Mr. Filch, our caretaker, has asked me to say that there is a blanket ban on any joke items bought at the shop called Weasley's Wizard. Wheezes. Those wishing to play for their house Quidditch teams should give their names to their heads of house as usual. We are also looking for new Quidditch commentators, who should do likewise. We are pleased to welcome a new member of staff this year, Professor Slughorn. Slughorn stood up, his bald head gleaming in the candlelight. His big waistcoat belly casting the table into shadow, is a former colleague of mine who has agreed to resume his old post of potions master. Potions. Potions. The word echoed all over the hall as people wondered whether they had heard right. Potions, said Ron and Hermione together, turning to stare Harry. But you said Professor Snape, meanwhile, said Dumbledore, raising voice so that it carried over all the muttering, will be taking the position of defense against the dark arts teacher. No, said Harry, so loudly that many heads turned in his direction. He did not care, he was staring up at the staff table, incensed. How could Snape be given the defense against the dark arts job after all this time? Hadn't it been widely known for years that Dumbledore did not trust him to do it? But Harry, you said that Slughorn was going to be teaching defense Against the dark arts, said Hermione. I thought he was, said Harry, racking his brains to remember when Dumbledore had told him this, but now that he came to think of it, he was unable to recall Dumbledore ever telling him what Slughorn would be teaching. Snape, who was sitting on Dumbledore's right, did not stand up his mention of his name. He merely raised a hand in lazy acknowledgement of the applause from the Slytherin table, yet Harry was sure he could detect a look of triumph on the features he loathed so much. Well, there's one good thing, he said savagely. Snape'll be gone by the end of the year. What do you mean? Asked Ron. That job's jinxed. No one's lasted more than a year. Quirrell actually died doing it. Personally, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed for another death. Harry, said Hermione, shocked and reproachful. He might just go back to teaching potions at the end of the year, said Ron reasonably. That Slughorn bloke might not want to stay long term. Moody didn't. Dumbledore cleared his throat. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were not the only ones who had been talking. The whole hall had erupted in a buzz of conversation at the news that Snape had finally achieved his heart's desire. Seemingly oblivious to the sensational nature of the news he had just imparted, Dumbledore said nothing more about staff appointments, but waited a few seconds to ensure that the silence was absolute before continuing. Now, as everybody in this hall knows, Lord Voldemort and his followers are once more at large and gaining in strength. The silence seemed to tauten and strain as Dumbledore spoke. Harry glanced at Malfoy. Malfoy was not looking at Dumbledore, but making his fork hover in midair with his wand, as though he found the headmaster's words unworthy of his attention. I cannot emphasize strongly enough how dangerous the present situation is, and how much care each of us at Hogwarts must take to ensure that we remain safe. The castle's magical fortifications have been strengthened over the summer. We are protected in new and more powerful ways, but we must still guard scrupulously against carelessness on the part of any student or member of staff. I urge you, therefore, to abide by any security restrictions that you teachers might impose upon you, however irksome you might find them, in particular, the rule that you are not to be out of after hours. I implore you, should you notice anything strange or suspicious within or outside the castle, to report it to a member of staff immediately. I trust you to conduct yourselves, always, with the utmost regard for your own and others' safety. Dumbledore's blue eyes swept over the students before he smiled once more. But now, your beds await, as warm and comfortable as you could possibly wish, and I know that your top priority is to be well rested for your lessons tomorrow. Let us therefore say good night. Pip pip. With the usual deafening scraping noise, the benches moved back and the hundreds of students began to file out of the great hall toward their dormitories. Harry, who was in no hurry at all to leave with the gawping crowd, nor to get near enough to Malfoy to allow him to retell the story of the nose stamping, lagged behind, pretending to rettie the lace on his trainer, allowing most of Gryffindor's to draw ahead of him. Hermione had darted ahead to fulfill her prefect's duty of shepherding the first years, but Ron remained with Harry. What really happened to your nose? He asked, once they were at the very back of the throng pressing out of the hall, and out of earshot of anyone else. Harry told him. It was a mark of the strength of their friendship that Ron did not laugh. I saw Malfoy miming something to do with a nose, he said darkly. Yeah, well, never mind that, said Harry bitterly. Listen to what he was saying before he found out I was there. Harry had expected Ron to be stunned by Malfoy's boasts. With what Harry considered pure pie-eatedness, however, Ron was unimpressed. Come on, Harry, he was just showing off for Parkinson. What kind of mission would you know who have given him? How do you know Voldemort doesn't need someone at Hogwarts? It wouldn't be the first. I wish you'd stop saying the name, Harry said, a reproachful voice behind them. Harry looked over his shoulder to see Hagrid shaking his head. Dumbledore uses that name, said Harry stubbornly. Yeah, well, THA's Dumbledore, innit? Said Hagrid mysteriously. So how come you were late, Harry? I was worried. Got held up on the train, said Harry. Why were you late? I was with Grob, said Hagrid happily. Lost track o' the time. He's got a new home up in the mountains now, Dumbledore fixed it, nice big cave. He's much happier than he was in the forest. We were having a good chat. Really? Said Harry, taking care not to catch Ron's eye. The last time he had met Hagrid's half-brother, a vicious giant with a talent for ripping up trees by the roots, his vocabulary had comprised 5 words, 2 of which he was unable to pronounce properly. Oh yeah, he's really come on, said Hagrid proudly. You'll be amazed. I'm thinking o' trainin' him up as me assistant. Ron snorted loudly, but managed to pass it off as a violent sneeze. They were now standing beside the oak front doors. Anyway, I'll see ye tomorrow, first lessons straight after lunch. Come early and ye can say hello to Buck, I mean, Witherwings. Raising an arm in cheery farewell, he headed out of the doors into the darkness. Harry and Ron looked at each other. Harry could tell that Ron was experiencing the same sinking feeling as himself. You're not taking care of magical creatures, are you? Ron shook his head. And you're not either, are you? Harry shook his head too. And Hermione, said Ron, she's not, is she? Harry shook his head again. Exactly what Hagrid would say when he realized his 3 favorite students had given up his subject. He did not like to think. Chapter 9, The Half-Blood Prince. Harry and Ron met Hermione in the common room before breakfast next morning. Hoping for some support in his theory, Harry lost no time in telling Hermione what he had overheard Malfoy saying on the Hogwarts Express. But he was obviously showing off for Parkinson, wasn't he? Interjected Ron quickly, before Hermione could say anything.